the bottom of the world, a river of ice, the size of Florida, sliding into the sea. It has been called the most dangerous glacier on Earth. Locked inside it, enough water to raise every ocean by 2 feet. For 30 years, satellites watched it retreat, slowly, steadily, like a long-held breath. Then the cracks appeared, racing across its floating edge, multiplying every spring, visible from space. And this year, scientists made a prediction they had never dared make before. The breakup has begun, and it finishes soon. This is Thwaites, the Doomsday Glacier. And this is the story of what happens when it lets go. West Antarctica, the Amundsen Sea coast, one of the most remote, most hostile places on the planet. Here sits Thwaites, the widest glacier on Earth, a single front of ice 75 miles across. Its drainage basin covers more ground than the state of Florida. In places, the ice is 3/4 of a mile thick, and it is moving. Near the coast, this ice slides more than 2 kilometers every single year. The nickname, Doomsday Glacier, didn't come from scientists. A journalist coined it in 2017, and it stuck. But the number behind the nickname is real. Melt all of Thwaites, and the global ocean rises 65 centimeters, more than 2 feet. And Thwaites is also a gate. Behind it spreads the West Antarctic Ice Sheet, holding more than 10 feet of sea level rise, which is why researchers call this glacier the most likely failure point of the entire ice sheet. The pin holding the grenade. Here is what satellites already measure today. Every year, Thwaites loses about 50 billion tons of ice, more than it gains in snowfall. Since the year 2000, it has shed over 1 trillion tons, and its outflow has doubled in 30 years. This one glacier drives roughly 4% of all sea level rise on Earth. Right now, the retreat isn't new. Seafloor sediments show it began back in the 1940s, and it has never once recovered. The glacier is also ungrounding. The line where its ice last rests on bedrock has pulled back 9 miles since the 90s. In 2019, radar spotted something alarming underneath the glacier, a cavity 2/3 the size of Manhattan. 14 billion tons of ice melted out from below, most of it in just 3 years. Something under this glacier is eating it alive. To find the culprit, you have to go down into the dark. Wrapped around Antarctica flows a deep ocean layer scientists call circumpolar deep water. Salty, dense, and warm. Warm is relative. This water sits only about 2 degrees above freezing. That does not sound like a killer. But under pressure, at depth, ice melts at a lower temperature. Down there, 2 degrees above freezing works like a blowtorch. And the seafloor is shaped like an invitation. Deep troughs, carved by ancient ice, funnel that warm water straight to the glacier. In 2019, a robot submarine swam beneath the ice and mapped the attack routes, rivers of warm water flowing along the trenches. In 2025, researchers described undersea storms, swirling eddies beneath the ice that melt it, stir in more heat, and melt it again. Ocean moorings show the warm layer has been thickening since 2020. The attack is not letting up, but the decisive battle happens at one precise place, the grounding line, where the glacier last touches bedrock before it floats. In 2018, the US and UK launched their largest joint Antarctic mission in history. $50 million, 100 scientists. Target, Thwaites. In January 2020, one team did something unprecedented. They melted a borehole 600 meters down through the glacier using hot water. The first sensors returned a reading that made headlines around the world. Water at the grounding line, 2 degrees above the freezing point. The lead scientist summed it up in 5 words. That is really, really bad. Then they lowered Icefin, a slender robot torpedo designed to one day explore the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. No human eyes had ever seen the underside of Thwaites. Icefin switched its cameras on, and the pictures rewrote the story. Across the flat ice base, melting ran slower than models predicted. A thin, cold layer shields it. But wherever the ice cracks, warm water funnels in sideways, carving staircase terraces, melting over 30 meters a year. Less melting overall, but aimed precisely at the weakest points. As one of the scientists put it, the glacier is still in trouble. In 2024, satellites caught the tide-pumping seawater 6 miles beneath the grounded ice, territory every model had assumed was dry. Why does all of this terrify glaciologists? Because of the shape of the land beneath the ice. Strip the ice away, and West Antarctica isn't a continent. It's a bowl, bedrock far below sea level, sloping downhill toward the interior. That geometry carries a brutal rule. As the ice edge retreats, the ice behind it is thicker, so it flows out faster. Retreat feeds retreat. Scientists call it marine ice sheet instability. The first warning was published in the journal Nature in 1978. The seafloor proves it has happened here before. In 2022, sonar found 160 ridges pressed into the seabed, footprints of a past retreat. They record Thwaites once pulling back, over 2 kilometers a year, twice as fast as anything satellites have ever watched it do. And in 2023, a smaller Antarctic glacier showed what fast really means. Hectoria lost 8 kilometers, nearly half its length, in 2 months. Different glacier, far smaller, but it settled the argument. When conditions align, ice doesn't retreat gradually. It collapses. Which brings us to right now. Because the front of Thwaites has a break, and the break is failing. The Thwaites Eastern Ice Shelf, a floating slab of ice pinned against an undersea ridge, bracing part of the glacier like a doorstop. In December 2021, scientists announced cracks were racing across it and warned it could shatter like a car windscreen within 5 years. The world's press ran the countdown. Then the shelf held on, slower than feared. Nature doesn't follow press conferences, but the satellites never blinked. And what they have recorded since is a snap in slow motion. Since 2016, the rifts have deepened and multiplied. The shelf's flow has accelerated 70%, nearly 3 meters per day, and it has been tearing loose from the undersea ridge that anchors it. Its last grip. In 2025, a 20-year satellite study mapped the fracturing stage by stage. The researchers' own words, "This is the shelf's last act." The British Antarctic Survey went further. Its lead marine scientist said the last remaining piece of shelf will very likely break up in 2026. And by this summer, that is exactly what observers are reporting. The final section is deteriorating fast, weeks or months from letting go. So let's talk honestly about that number, 2 feet, because it sounds almost survivable. First, sea level doesn't rise evenly. Antarctica's ice is so massive that its gravity pulls the ocean toward itself. When the ice melts, that grip relaxes. Sea level around Antarctica actually falls, and the water piles up on the far side of the planet. For North American coasts, that means roughly 30% extra. Antarctica's 2 feet arrives in New York closer to 3. Second, Flooding doesn't scale gently. A rise of 2 feet turns today's once-a-century flood into an annual event across much of the coast. Tidal flooding, streets underwater on a sunny day, no storm required, has already more than doubled in the US since 2000. Add 2 feet, and today's official flood stage becomes, roughly, the new everyday high tide. 110 million people already live below the high tide line. Miami, Jakarta, Shanghai, Alexandria, New Orleans. Miami sits on porous limestone. The ocean doesn't need to climb the seawalls there. It rises up through the ground. The projected bill, up to $1 trillion in coastal flood damage per year by 2050. So, is this doomsday? Here is what the scientists who actually drilled, dived, and mapped this glacier concluded. The full 2 feet is not coming this century. The mission's models point to steady retreat, around 6 more centimeters by 2100, not collapse. The nightmare scenario, towering ice cliffs failing in a runaway chain reaction, was stress-tested in 2024. Verdict: unlikely in our lifetime. But the same synthesis warns, the retreat will keep accelerating through this century and the next, and it may already be unstoppable. Some studies place West Antarctica's point of no return just a fraction of a degree away. A line crossed, not with a bang, but in silence. Thwaites will not flood Miami in your lifetime. The real stakes. This decade may lock in an ocean that no future generation can refuse. In December 2026, the largest Antarctic science mission ever mounted packs up its final field camps. Behind the departing planes, the ice shelf they spent 8 years studying is coming apart, exactly as their instruments said it would. The glacier at the end of the world doesn't care about nicknames or headlines or deadlines. It answers only to physics and to warm water and 2 feet of ocean, still frozen for now, waits quietly at the bottom of the map.